What is going on? Welcome back to Trending Stocks. Today I want to give you a quick overview of what happened with SoFi, go over some of the data points and everything else you need to know. But first, make sure to hit that thumbs up and subscribe. Always greatly appreciate that. And with that said, let's get right to it. So SoFi did go down 1.79%. The technicals are still somewhat neutral, so a lot of people are starting to turn very bearish. And the reason why people are starting to turn a little bit more bearish and I guess impatient with SoFi is you see Palantir. Even though technically SoFi and Palantir are completely different sectors, a lot of people like to compare them. And so technically both did have some pretty kick-ass earnings. Both ran up on earnings day. Palantir continued that run up today, 7.91%. SoFi gets slammed down, and both have very comparable, similar, I guess, traits when it comes down to analysts. Some analysts were giving $5 price targets for Palantir, and when it comes down to SoFi, same thing. So I think a lot of people are just getting discouraged, the fact that SoFi is just manipulated. And I think that is hands down one of the biggest differences between SoFi and Palantir, based on the fundamentals aside from their business model and whatnot, is shorts. Palantir, I don't know if it has to do with the whole AI bubble, essentially. Shorts haven't even touched it. So I think it's around like 7% short interest. Whereas SoFi, shorts today hammered it. So they did increase about 2.8 million shares right here. 13.73% of the free floats being shorted. 125.17 million shares overall are being shorted. And cost to borrow minimum is negative 0.2. So there is a broker out there that is trying to short and incentivize shorting SoFi, because with it negative, that does mean that they're paying people to short SoFi. And I have had some comments on previous videos when I brought that up, just saying why would a broker do that? That's a very good question. I honestly don't have an answer to that. They do have to benefit somehow, right? It's no different than anyone else. Nobody would do something without it benefiting them in some way. And so technically they might be correlated with shorts. They might be a direct competition to SoFi to try and bring it down. There's a lot of different options, but the concrete answer, I don't think anyone will ever know, as bad as that is. But still, that's one of the biggest differences between, for instance, SoFi and Palantir and a lot of other growth stocks. Just SoFi seems to be getting more and more manipulated, and it is very discouraging coming from a retail standpoint. So again, that's kind of what is happening today. And despite it pulling down, it kind of is somewhat still okay for the technicals. Today, there was no news, no SEC filings, nothing along those lines. The technicals, like I mentioned, are somewhat still good as long as this S1 does hold. It's bounced off of this twice over the last several trading days, not today exactly. So it did have a low today of $7.57, but this S1 is $7.51. So technically you really want to watch for that to hold going forward. As soon as that does break, that's when the technicals will really kind of disintegrate really fast. And then vice versa, as I've explained to you, the pivot point is $8.26. So that's going to be a very strong resistance, as is $8. So that's going to be where it's more brought on by options. And so market makers won't want it to be and closing above $8. So you're going to have two different resistance levels. So the technicals is kind of just being wedge bound between this S1 and those two resistance points like I just mentioned. Looking right here, momentum shows number of retail investors were flat. So as you can kind of tell, I think just the sentiment isn't necessarily the best. People are getting kind of annoyed the fact that SoFi isn't back at where a lot of people do realistically think it should be. Even myself, I do feel that it should be at least in the $10 range, or at least probably around $9. Even looking at the latest Morningstar report, it does show the fair market value for SoFi being $14.50. Even analysts as a consensus right here, $9.13. And a lot of the analyst ratings are complete bullshit, pardon my French. So technically that's dragging it down. So it just sucks ultimately. So yeah, let me know your thoughts on that. As far as options though, for today, $3.63 million in calls being purchased versus $1.49 million in puts. Sentiment wise, 43% of all the options being done today were bullish. Obviously, that's a little bit lower in comparison to the last several days. A lot of the options being done were relatively neutral. So $727,000 worth of options were neutral. So people just collecting premiums. And like I said, that kind of correlates with what I just mentioned, how a lot of people are just anticipating SoFi just to be kind of wedge bound between those two support and resistance points. So generally speaking, that is kind of good for options traders. Is any volatile stock such as SoFi, any growth stock as well, especially under my other channel, I cover a lot of EVs, a lot of volatility. Options and volatility work hand in hand. This is where you can make a lot of money. So highly suggest researching options because, like I said, if you do really like SoFi or any other stock, you could easily sell covered calls, sell puts, buy calls, or even if you do anticipate a stock to go down, buy some puts as well. There's lots of different variations that you can do. But of course, as I always say though, I'm not a financial advisor, so you guys always do your own due diligence. Of the call options that were purchased today, there is a consensus for it to be roughly about above 750. Of the puts that are being purchased, it is anticipated to be sub 750. So that S1 that I mentioned, people are clearly anticipating for that to break. So all in all, I think SoFi is doing somewhat okay. Just a lot of people are very impatient with SoFi and kind of understandable. I think this is probably the 7th back-to-back home run earnings that SoFi has had, and we're basically like, even if you zoom out looking at SoFi, so over the last, let's say 1 year, it is up 3.79%. That's relatively crappy. Even if you zoom out, well, obviously kind of zooming in here, even once they did get the charter bank status, like it's just been crap. So it's an interesting stock no matter what though. I do believe in it long term. This is why I do continue to buy, average down. I do frequently options, so that way you can collect a lot of premiums and it does lower your average in general. So I don't know. SoFi, it's just a lot of people are starting to say that SoFi is broken. I don't think so. It's just being manipulated behind the scenes. And plus, it's just a very volatile stock. As I've said on almost one of the very first times I've ever started to cover SoFi, like it's trying to be a innovative company in one of the oldest sectors. That is not an easy task. Whereas again, as I mentioned, Palantir, that's kind of unknown territory. There's no real competition for Palantir. So technically it can go to the sky, like the sky's the limit. Whereas with SoFi, it is going up against a lot of big competition, even based on the analyst ratings. A lot of these right here, like they do not want SoFi to succeed by any means. So again, it's just a waiting game. So let me know your thoughts on SoFi. Don't forget to hit that thumbs up and subscribe. I always greatly appreciate that. Give yourself a shout out. Did you buy SoFi? Did you sell? What did you do with SoFi? And like I've mentioned over the last couple of videos, where do you see things going? Do you think it's going to retrace back into the 7s? Do you think it eventually will make a break for the $8 range? Or what's your thoughts on all that? Don't forget to hit that thumbs up, like I said. And with all that, I appreciate all of you watching.